back to PA Truck Up. I am your host Manny, and today we have Thomas Newman. Hi Tom, how are we doing?
Hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
Good. Different platform, which you highly recommended to me. It's a lot easier, so I will have to give you your flowers on this one.
Well, I told you again. If I can understand it, then everybody should be using it. It's easy enough.
It's just the other app was giving me trouble, so here we are. But we have also pre-recorded this, and something happened on my end. But we're essentially going to try have the same conversation. But
we'll see where it goes. It'll be good.
We'll probably go wild.
There we go.
But for those listening, if you sort of give a little background on how you became a strength coach and how you've sort of developed as a strength coach as well.
Yeah, so I think, we talked about this on the last podcast as well, where my journey through this has been kind of unique. Coming through exercise science, working through personal training, going into Division 3, doing startup, going Division 1, and then going into a hospital setting, back to startup. It's been a pretty unique journey, but I think each step along the way, there's been incredible learning lessons. And when I think about the situation, that we're at now with Newman HP to be able to go and help individuals around the world, I think I draw on all of those experiences, both for the good, the bad, and everywhere in between. And so it's really exciting to kind of talk about with you some of the things that we're doing. And again, whether it's the cognitive training, whether it's logistics, whether it's, some of the latest and greatest on the actual rep schemes that we're seeing, come alive with our players. It's a really exciting time. So I'm excited. And again, too, whatever we can do to kind of push everything forward is kind of the mission that we have day in and day out.
And what's something that's getting you really fired up in this industry just now?
Well, a couple things. And I know you and I have gone back and forth. I think AI is incredible at the moment. And AI, not in that it's going to replace coaches, not that it's, going to, have some magical formula that's going to, prevent all your injuries. But from a time-saving standpoint, I think that, if right now we look at some of the basic apps that are out there, and whether it's ChatGPT, Replit, Lindy, any of these things where we can start to develop workflows, really, like if you're a coach, you don't have enough time in the day and you don't make enough money. And, of those two things, we can affect one and make sure that we're absolutely as efficient as possible and make sure we're spending the most amount of time with our athletes, but also not letting things slip through the cracks and making sure that data is recorded, data is logged, and then your time is best redirected towards working with the athletes rather than getting stuck, doing the repetitive thing we talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. If you can do it 6 times in a row with formal rules and structure, that's an AI job this time. So we really think about trying to make sure that we can maximize all those opportunities. So that on the digital side gets me really excited, especially too, because now more than ever, we have so much data. I'm going to be honest, even at the highest level, nobody's using it. Mm-hmm. People are completely overlooking it, or if they are, it's so siloed, it's not really practical by the time it comes to fruition. And then I think on the other side, for coaching athletes, it's a very different time. So when we talk about working with an athlete of this generation, it's a lot softer skills. It's much higher EQ. And also to the coaches where, it would just be like, this is our process and listen to me because I said so. Athletes are one GPT away, one Google search away from actually calling you out. And so the coaches that didn't take the time to individualize, didn't take the time to, really, truly, and again, the best it can be argued a couple different ways. But I think what I'm hearing more and more from athletes, both at the professional level and even at the college and high school level, is there's a real interest to kind of take control of their career. Because more so now than ever, we can get feedback. We can get feedback if we're getting more powerful. We can get feedback if we're, seeing increases in velocity or everything in between. And that's really where the great strength coaches, if we've always talked about where we wanted to live, we wanted to be judged by, the work that we do in our work. Yes, it's scientific, but also that's the reason why it's called the art and the science. And so now more than ever, when I talk to younger coaches, the days of having to pay your dues for 5 to 10 years and all of that, if you can leverage some of these tools and be really, really, really good at the basic fundamentals, it's a pretty incredible time for our industry, which is, long overdue to really kind of show the value that we have that extends outside of just being a regular support staff in an institution, if that makes sense.
100%. And so I'm currently reading How AI Will Change Your Life. And it's exactly what you've just said. It's not that it's going to replace us, but it's just how can we now leverage it to make us be more sought after. And I think one of the best examples it's on the leadership. And when the internet first came into the world, people were scared of it. People didn't want to do much with it. Now that's all we do. So it's kind of like that thing that if you become really good at working with it and figuring out how to use it properly, I think that's going to be the future of this industry. And I can't say this without addressing that I was first a hater with it until you spoke to me and sat me down and like, stop being stupid about it.
Well, it's just an opportunity, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. But I think also that the tool is only as good as the coach. I mean, think about it: stopwatch, clipboard, barbell. It's just a digital tool. Most of our tools have been physical, tangible things, but now it's getting into this new digital realm. And so as a practitioner, how can I leverage it? What can I do? And I think that's super important. And what do we love doing? We love working with individuals. We love building relationships and reps. Nobody signed up to make spreadsheets and pie charts. That's not why you become a coach. But now if we can leverage that, and what is it good at? Not missing details. What is it good? Following rules. All things that when you've been on the floor for 16 hours coaching your butt off, maybe you don't have that time and maybe you want to go home and see your family. Let the bots go and do it. And we talk about all the time, we have our staff, our carbon-based staff, so our employees, and then we have our non-carbon staff. And these are AI agents that have been built up. And what becomes really exciting is if I take a carbon employee, pair them up with someone who's really one of the agents that's specialized in marketing or maybe emotional intelligence or maybe leadership, whatever we've trained them up in their industry specific domain, no different than on every staff. Every staff has a speed person, a strength person, all those things. But now let's combine that ambient intelligence and let the two of them work off each other. Team dynamics now, like we always talk about, what's the group dynamics like? What's the team dynamic? Well, now we have a digital carbon, non-carbon team dynamic. And it's really interesting to see that if you train up the agents right, it's really incredible to see where maybe I don't have an understanding of how to write in Python. Maybe I don't know how to use JavaScript, but I have this really important problem, but I go to an agent or a bot or a program that can take my problem. And as I verbalize in the spoken word, what the issue is, to create a native app. That's huge. That's a new opportunity. And again, who's going to benefit? Our clients. Who's going to benefit? Other coaches. And so that's what gets me really excited. And, I just think that it's important with any tool. There's a little bit of good. We don't want to see the pendulum swing the other way. Again, at best, AI right now is cruise control, right? You can move around a little bit, but you still got to keep your hands on the wheel and you got to make sure that you're responsible, not only for the outputs, but also the processing, because AI can make mistakes. And so that's really where, it's a time saver. It's not a replacement of the final decision.
100%. And personally speaking, since we had our conversation about it, it has took away a lot of the manual tasks that would usually go on a day-to-day for me. And it's a time saver for sure. You also kind of touched on it, but I kind of want to bring a little bit more in depth into this. But it's the performance metrics, the data that we can collect, they can summarize and sort of break it down a little bit more. What were some of the ways that you found that you can get more accurate readings for what is actually happening on a physical level?
Well, we've talked about flexible nonlinear, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of that you go to the rack, you have a couple different workouts you may or may not do, but there's rules, or we call it gatekeeping, where we need to get someone strong. Well, we don't want to do a heavy lift right before a game, let's say. So there's context, but we have context to these rules. And so training up the agents to be able to go and look and say, okay, of aura data, of force plate data, of game data, of all these different things, are you seeing any connections, correlations, or things I should be aware of? And I'll give you an example is that we had a pitcher who had 447 force plate jumps. He had almost 10 months of aura data. He had his game logs, he had all of these things. And what was one of the things before we wrote the next workout? What do you think was one of the things that stood out that the agents caught that I didn't between the metrics?
Just how you're getting better data from obviously using AI and how you're just we were talking about linear periodization.
And really one of the things that we've noticed by using the agents, especially for stuff like flexible nonlinear, is we're able to now capture not only the workouts and understanding what's the best workout for today based off, say, a jump or their readiness score. We're able to look historically and say, hey, when we're writing rules for this next workout, what are some of the things that we need to be considering, things that maybe we overlooked in the past? And so when we looked through with one of our players most recently, we looked at aura data, we looked at vertical jump, we looked at wellness, we looked at the workout logs and game data. And man, what do you think the number one thing that constantly kept coming up when it related to heavy days? What do you think it was?
Stress and sleep quality.
Body temperature. So when the body temperature was elevated 0.2 degrees Celsius, It showed that the workouts necessarily weren't the best. It didn't hit their targets and goals, but then also reported when we looked at the vertical jump the next day, it had a much higher cost with decreasing vertical jump than we had originally anticipated. So it wasn't that the workout was bad, it was that the timing and the sequence wasn't there. So one of the things that we look at now, and I would have never thought to look at it, is try to look at the body temperature on the day of the jump. And also too, from perceived stress on days where there was decreased sleep, stress was perceived as higher, even though it was normal stressful situations. It really is one of those things where when we think about what the agents can do, they're really good at being able to make sure that they can look for trends and things to then come up to the coaching staff and have a conversation about. And I think that's where we've really seen some incredible application of this stuff, because I would have never, ever in a million years think to check that first, especially when it comes to prescriptively either using or not using a heavy day.
That's quite interesting. It's kind of like the effect that when we've gone to that really heavy and they start, getting that runny nose, that really, that sickness feeling, obviously the body temperature's rising because it's trying to fight stuff. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think the other question that we had too was this always happening after road trips? So maybe we don't do the heavy days after, more than 5 days on the road or 10 days on the road. We would normally say we would do that on a Monday or 2 days after they would pitch. Maybe we need to shift and move that. But again, these are all conversations that I think in the past where it'd be like, we're going to do this block or we're going to do that block. That whole idea of that you're going to have a controlled environment, it just isn't practical in the real world. You're missing opportunities, or more likely than not, you're going to inadvertently overload someone. That heavy day that normally would be great actually is going to further push them down. And it's really interesting to see how some of these simple concepts of stress, adaptation, supercompensation with all the different data streams can actually get pretty complicated if you don't have some sort of technological help to be able to make sure that you have that and do it in a meaningful way, in a meaningful time frame, and not 6 weeks after in a white paper.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I'm thinking if we had to longhand this, we'd have to have a lot of data before that trend became important.
Right. And I think it's one of those ones that maybe this offseason we go through and look across multiple players. And was it multiple pitchers? Was it different locations? And was it, heavy being 300 pounds, is treated one way than heavy at 400 or 500 pounds? Or is it a complex movement like a squat rather than, say, a leg press? These are all the different things that, in post we'll be able to just actually write out or, in some cases be able to verbally speak and ask those questions. But it's just a whole thing that never did I think this was going to be possible. Because, you're still talking about, and everything I just mentioned, you're talking about thousands and thousands of rows of data. One vertical jump is going to give you upwards of 200 different data points, which is important. What are you going to do? And then go to Aura. Then you're going to go to wellness. You're going to go to workouts. You're going to go to all these things. It's not feasible to be able to do that, in a 10, 15-minute window like we do with the agents.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. And again, something that you brought up during the webinar you did for me, it's different areas of the jump and the metrics that you get for it, and how picking one or two data points to look at as opposed to all of them can be more beneficial to make the programming and periodization blocks a little bit more specific to what they're needing.
Totally. And I think that that's where you have to have the conversation of what matters. And I think I've told you before, at the end of the day, we just want our clients to get paid. So whatever we got to do to get them to perform better, and that doesn't necessarily mean we have to chase a number, but we do need to be strong. We need to go after certain velocities, but it just can't be that we're just moving super lightweight fast. Like, there are thresholds to all of this, and it's understanding here today, now as you present in front of me, what training stimulus or what recovery stimulus is going to help get you to be the best version of you, not only in the long-term arc, but in the short term, being able to make sure you keep your starting position, and then be able to do it not only for 1 year, 2 year, but doing for the long haul, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. So that's where, again, it's super exciting, and to think about how much data a college might collect or a professional organization. Just, again, what used to take entire teams, you're now talking about building really intelligent agents that are only getting better every day. And again, I said, like, right now, it's at best, it's at cruise control. But think about where it was 6 months ago when you and I started talking. It's evolved even since then. So figure out how to embrace it, figure out how to make it no different than a stopwatch in your toolbox. But ultimately, we know right now is it can definitely save you time. That's why our non-carbon coach is named Coach Slash. And so that's in reference to time. And that's what his goal is to make sure that, we can maximize every opportunity to be forward facing and not stuck in the spreadsheets and pie charts of data.
This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance. You can host it in TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr also now has two different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuildr, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PAChalkup all together, you will get a 30-day free trial. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to run something by you to get your thoughts on. And it's this idea that obviously different blocks of training are going to require different stimulus. So say it's a high explosive, high power output. Are you looking more at takeoff, and maybe when it's more recovery, more eccentrics, a little bit more padding building? Are you looking at different sort of data points for this during that time?
Yeah, and the first part, my question back to you is, who am I working with? What am I trying to accomplish? Am I a young pitcher who's at 92? And again, I say pitching just because this time of the year, this is where the bulk of our clients are fighting and scrapping for, postseason playoff appearances. But let's just take that. If I'm dealing with someone who's at 91, 92, every mile an hour is worth about $2 million, plus or minus. So if I can make someone from 92 to 93, that's a huge benefit. And we know that 93 miles an hour is a significant number. But if I have someone who's at 96, do I really care if they go to 97, 98? I mean, it's not terrible, but it has a way different impact. But if I'm starting to see that the deceleration forces or some of the strategy metrics aren't present, well, that's where I'm going to shift those. So I could be looking at a force plate for two pitchers, but have different metrics for each person. But it's got to go to the context of what's the issue. Are they breaking down over time, or is there a synchronicity problem? So maybe I do an arm swing jump versus say, a mid thigh pull or something like that. Like you can really get creative on each person and then set your parameters and rules both to their normative data, but then also to the data within the research.
How do you break down some of the context-based tests that you will do? So say, is that pitcher that's trying to get a little bit faster, so you include the arm swing, or if you're doing a mid-thigh pull, how do you determine which one needs what?
We start with the athlete composite and we look at what do you need to be successful? And so for them, when we do our testing, preseason or interseason, we go through and look, whatever they're most efficient at, that's what we're trying to do. And I think a big mistake people try to do is try to optimize and perfect and get everything better. A lot of times what we're doing is try to mitigate against risk. And I like to think more of being like an insurance policy, underwriter, where if I look at someone who's got a 99 mile an hour fastball, but doesn't have the strategy to be able to absorb that, as we see on the plates, as on the landing side or how they load up, that's going to come at a much higher premium. Now, if I'm the strength coach and I see that, I'm going to make that my focal point. And I think that if you look at across all the different, players and positions, there's always something to work on. But I would also say, as you've alluded to blocks really need to be changed to sequences. I might need to sequence this person 6 to 8 times for this metric, for this dynamic. And then once that number gets up there, it might be something else. Because again, the biology is always changing. What's their sleep? What's their training density? All of these things. And you have to be dynamic. And I would even say that human performance, strength and conditioning as it stands right now might be more volatile and more dynamic than even the games themselves that the athletes are playing. I think about on a football field, or I think about in soccer, there's a lot of known parameters, size of the field, like how many players, there's usually set plays. But we go to think about how many degrees of freedom does the shoulder have, and then also, how many, 168 hours in the week. We have them for 4 to 6 hours in the weight room or training time. What are they doing, personally, professionally, at all these different levels? Like there's a lot of interference. And so, I always laugh when someone's like, well, we're going to put someone on a mass gaining plan, a hypertrophy plan. And my first question's like, what's their nutrition like? Did you do a DEXA? Don't tell me that you're going to argue about 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 10, whatever your rep scheme is, if you haven't done these other things. So that's where the context becomes important. And a lot of this used to be theoretical, but now with the technologies that we have, we can write really, really prescriptive plans that are super individualized. And I think that's where everything's headed. And the players are starting to notice it too.
I think what you've said there is, like, we've always spoken about exercise being prescriptive. Like, you prescribe someone the exercise, but the context was missing. But now that you do have these data points and these very refined ways of looking at performance, we can genuinely prescribe specific workouts. And I think, again, I've been fortunate enough to sit on some of the calls with you and your athletes, and the way that works is I can describe as unique because like now they're understanding what's happening with their performance without you even being there.
And that's one of our core values is educate, right? We talk about educate, advocate, execute. So those are our big three. And so understanding to their level, right? Not every player wants a PhD level or a master's level understanding of physiology. But I think any high performer has a little bit of anxiety when it's like, man, I'm looking a little fluffy, or I'm a step behind, or I'm not recovering, or I've got this pain. But what we can do is say, hey, these things are going to happen in sports. Like there's no such thing as injury prevention. Go look at all the research, all the data, all the science, all the papers. Go look at the NCAA statistics on injuries. Injuries aren't going away. They shift and move. Weak things break. Things that don't recover fall apart. So we know that. But what can we do internally within our staff to go and say, okay, we're going to make sure that everybody who's on an ACL plan has a blood work that looks respectable. They're not going to be vitamin D in the single digit numbers. They're not going to be pre-diabetic. They're not going to have terrible other metrics as it relates to rest and recovery. Get all of that stuff squared away so that way your ACL plan can actually be that much better. And to your point, theoretically we were in the right direction, but now you can drill down on such an incredible level for what? As a professional, maybe $200-300, you get yourself a DEXA, get yourself a little bit of blood work, and go jump on some force plates. That's a tremendous tool that just didn't even exist 10 years ago.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Something else that you dive really deep into, and we've previously spoken about, but I kind of want to get how you're integrating it with your program, and it's that cognitive piece with your players and how they're using it to perform better.
Yeah, I think. What was so exciting for me is one of the players goes, so cognitive's no different than a bicep. Right. You look at the PVT, focus and attention. That's a measurable thing. The PVT test is used in some situations. You actually have to pass the attention test in order to get your card to be accessed to get into facilities, because if you're not paying attention, mistakes can be, very costly or deadly. Why aren't we training attention? And then let's go a step further. Short-term memory, writing, whether it's verbal or visual or doing any of the other executive functioning tasks. Stop tests, stop signs, Stroop test, all these different things have lived off in their own silo. We've now incorporated it. And what the players are starting to notice is that just like anything else, flexibility, strength, speed, being deficient in any of that costs them money. Except for cognitive, you can do on your phone, you can do it on your laptop. And you can measure it. And at first there's a little bit of skepticism of what are these silly games, or this is really boring. But the whole point is that if you go and you look and you drop their contract and you're like, when you hit these numbers, just like power, just like, barrel, exit velocity, pitching velocity, all these things, when these things are here, you get paid. But you see the people that struggle and thinking of cognitive, how about this? Breaking cognitive up into two categories. We have the psychology of things, but then there's just the machinery. Just like we talk about muscle size on the DEXA, but then that muscle needs to have function. So now we're going to measure it in the weight room or on the plates. Cognitive, we need to make sure that none of those things are deficient, because if you're processing the world slow, that doesn't help. I mean, try to play basketball with an eye closed. Try to play with, basketball or baseball without sleeping for 2 or 3 days. Like all of those things, the tasks never change. And I really credit Mark Stevenson to that, because he was the one that really, really challenged me to think about, okay, is the task getting easier or is the person getting better? People talk about the game slowing down. The game didn't slow down. Your ability to handle that information wasn't overwhelming. You didn't miss details. And what happens if you take someone who's really good, but they're super stiff? You'd be like, oh, put them on a flexibility plan. That'll be great. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you do when you have an all-star that, cognitively is terrible? You put him on a plan. He's now seeing body language in the box that he's like, oh, they want it up and away. I'm going to go in and at them. And it's the best season he's had. I mean, that's what gets exciting for me. And I hope that listeners realize we're not talking cognitive needing to take over the hour in the weight room. It's 5 to 10 minutes. Think of it like activation. Like you activate, you do your clamshells, mini bands, you do a cognitive section, get that stuff up to speed. And then if you go look at someone like Brandon Stone's work, where we look at 80% of heart rate reserve, that's really where, what can we do as strength and conditioning professionals to make sure that when the heart rate goes up, the stress goes up, we don't have a cliff, spatially remembering, what do I do if the person's on first and third? Or if I see this defense, or if the safety breaks this way, all of that is calculations. And if the brain is just trying to survive, trying to get up and down the field, you're going to miss that information. So I really do credit Mark a lot with getting me to start to think about, but now more than ever, all of our players, I need you to be elite cognitively as best as you can be with no deficiencies. And then we're going to smash you with conditioning, terrible conditioning, and see what your brain's like there. And we've all been there. We've seen it. We've seen the athlete that struggles as soon as there's a little bit of stress applied. And to do it safely, you can't be reckless with it. But I think it's a tremendous superpower to an athlete to be like, wow, I can just see the game better. I'm able to make decisions and able to, apply the skill and all the hard work that they've been doing in the weight room for years in a different way and see really, really good success with it.
I think it goes back to that thing where we're talking about when performance starts to dip. Obviously, cognitively, you start to go. But when we're adding stress into, say, like a sports performance training session, so like I'm a rugby player, so you can't imitate the stressful situations that happen in a game of training. With this cognitive piece now, you can expose them to hard conditioning so that they're perceiving it in an exhausted state. Do you think it matches what they might face in a real game situation?
Nothing replaces real game. At best, with virtual reality or AR or VR, we can get close. But what we can do is expose their brain to high levels, of hydrogen ions or high acidity. What we can do is create a big aerobic load. What we can do is, make them out of breath. What we can do is whatever the situation is, heavy legs, but then have to think. And even something simple, I don't know if I told you this one, but like take a deck of cards, put up 5 cards, line up. Okay, everybody look at it. Okay, and then now get on the line. All right, I want you to shuffle left if the total value of the cards was even. Go. Well, what is that? That's recall. And think about when you had a coach in rugby, what was a lot of it? It was like, hey, we have these formations, we have these situations. There was a thing that you needed to remember that the coach or the team had to install, but then the other team was both tactically and physically trying to combat it. That's all recall. So what we can do is start training recall. Hey, if this, then that, or you're going to look for this color, you're going to look for that, or coach is going to talk. I'm going to read off some letters and numbers, and then you guys have to remember it. What you'd find is that even with a little bit of fatigue, that memory becomes really weak. I mean, right now you can probably remember, your grandparents' house when you were little, but you can't remember what you had for breakfast on Thursday 6 weeks ago because that memory doesn't have the same emotional context. So what we try to do is expose them to those situations where they have to recall, they have to process, they have to work together. All of those things, if the brain is behind, it doesn't help.
Yeah. No, I was actually about to ask, like, what are some of your strategies to bring up these specific cognitive KPIs? And we have spoken about it, and it's that the card games that someone can do very easily. Like you can buy a deck of cards for a couple pounds, and you can be like, hey, red, blue, or black. Do a pro call, squats, conditioning, and then be like, what was the cards in the exact order? Then you can progress. And I think this is what's most fascinating to me right now is the progressive overload that you can do with it. So obviously you can start easy, colors, red, black, or black, red. But then you could be like, okay, I want colors, and then I want the suits. And then suits, tell me the specific card. And I think that's, again, it's what you said. It's not taking an hour of the weight room, but it's like strategically placing it in your program to gain that stimulus from it.
Hey, everybody, I'm going to call out the following numbers. Everybody ready? 4, 5, 8, A, B, 6. Everybody remember? Okay, good. Everybody hop up on the road bikes. Let's go. Ready? We're going to go. Everybody's got to pass, got to get a mile in whatever amount of time. Hop off. And then I'm going to pick one of you guys and you're going to repeat back all of the numbers that I just said. Ready? Go. And so they'll go, they get their speed done, they hit their time. Someone comes out, I can't remember what you just said, right? So we typically will do something like everybody has to run this sprint in a certain amount of time. All I'm saying is yes, you need to do that. But when you hit that time, you can't forget what we were doing, or you don't know how to, apply. And again, if it's memory recall or if it's working together with executive functioning, just add that to the back end. And when we think about, you talked about the cards, Manny, some of our top guys get 6 or 7 cards deep in their conditioning where you just ask them stuff and they were able to remember and they learn how to chunk and they learn how to prioritize in their brain and really remember it. And, whether it's 3 sets of 10, a back squat, come out, what were the cards, what were your suits? you don't even have to touch. Don't mess with the actual strength training, but just start tracking. Like once we finish this station, did you forget? Now let's go to the next station. I'm going to give you new cards. So now we're just constantly practicing laying down short-term memory, recalling it during stressful times. Even if you just did it with 2 or 3 cards, you would be amazed how many people fall apart, get upset, get frustrated. And a lot of athletes go, I just want to lift. I don't want to have to do all this stuff. And it's like, well, but that's the problem. It's because chances are when you get into a game, say football, there's 4 or 5, maybe 6 plays that make up the entire outcome and what you do in those short periods of time. And it's going to have to be so automatic. You may not have time to think. It's going to have to be second nature. So why aren't we practicing these things? And like I just said, visual, well, then you can do it verbal. I mean, even things, I'm going to put a picture up on an iPad, everybody in the position group on this play drive. Okay. How many people were in the background? How many people had hats in the background? How many buildings were in this? What are you able to take from what you see, extract, remember, and then be able to recall it to apply either the next run or to get out of a drill? It's easy.
100%. I think, again, I was watching a show the other day, and it was talking about like elite snipers in the army and how they train when they have to focus for, say, 12 to 24 hours. And it's like they create whole images in their head to keep them focused and narrowed in on this specific target. And it's exactly that. It's creating this bank of abilities to be able to recall and make decisions in a split second. Because like that is what sport is. Like you can get a pass. Now you can either see 2 routes or you can see half of a route. And it does become that thing when you're trying to get scholarships, D1 positions, pro, like who's drafting what, where am I getting drafted?
And when we see, especially when you talk about the draft is already, you've been hand selected. Usually physically, you're pretty close to the metrics. But when people say, wow, they just can't handle it the next level, realistically, it's that they can't process the information. Instead of running 1 or 2 plays, every play has 3 or 4 audibles. Even just the names of the plays get so long. So there's this important, just like we need strength, like general strength to have, sport specific strength, there's cognitive strength and there's cognitive, things that you need to be able to do that if you don't, you're going to struggle. And I just think to coaches, you'd be shocked, one, how easy it is to train and what it does to like on-field performance, but also how quickly, just like anything, it's a perishable skill. People talk about, you need to hit max velocity, whatever, many times. Cognitive, you got to hit that every day, every other day. But that's just like why we have reading. Like, why is reading so important? You have to practice the act of scanning, recalling, and then applying what you did. And that's knowledge extraction. We have to practice that. And just, sports didn't used to do nutrition either. Mm-hmm. Sports didn't necessarily, everybody didn't lift weights, right? It was all conditioning. So I think it's a natural evolution, especially now with the technologies. It'll be even more and more clear of how, we need to include this just like we do the other domains of the weight room, and they're not separate.
I think that kind of leads on to my next question, and it's the recovery piece. And I know you place a great emphasis on recovery and how they're achieving that with such a high-paced schedule. Baseball has more games in a week than some sports seasons altogether.
Right. Yeah, 162 games to try to figure out how to be the very best every time. And if you're not, you're on the bench. And then if that doesn't work, you're going to get moved down or you're going to get DFA'd. So making sure that you're maximizing every opportunity, not only on the training stimulus, but on the recovery stimulus. And I started talking it like that, Manny, because if I ask most programs when we go in and consult with clients, say with the college university, show me your workout. What do you think everybody shows me? Show me a workout card. Maybe it's 3-4 times a week. Well, then you ask, well, what's the recovery plan? And it's crickets. It's somebody else's job. Well, your recovery needs to be part of that equation. And it's like, it doesn't have to be the float tank. It can be, we actually during this period know that we can get to the dining halls and there's going to be food. And the players know what kind of macros that they need to hit for their goal. Whether it's recomp, lean out, or if they're trying to, add muscle or anywhere in between. So you need to have that kind of targeted plan. I don't just want to see, here's my 4 workouts. I mean, that is so old school of that, you think you live in a vacuum. You don't know. And then, okay, we have 10 players. Each one of them is going to have a different battle rhythm. This person's in class. This person's got something going on at home. This person, is going to be with us in the summer. So you need to start accounting for all that stuff if you're trying to write a real plan. I mean, at the end of the day, you can just throw 3 days a week, basic strength, like it's fine, but that's not high performance. That's not maximizing the opportunity of the athletes. And to the point that we made earlier on the show, athletes are starting to wake up. And they're starting to realize that they can take control and that, yeah, no, we can actually make a huge difference because now there's money at stake at the NIL level. There's probably even money at the high school levels. If it's not direct, it's indirect now. So a lot of different economics going on. But guess who's going to be at the center of it? Human performance, strength and conditioning, because if we get you stronger, getting stronger never hurts. And again, to a point. And then we do our cognitive, then we do our recovery, we do all other domains. All of that stuff layered in with good skill instruction, that's how you can position yourself to be the best.
100%. And I think that's kind of like currently one of the issues I'm having. It's because like obviously we've got the spectrum where if we're thinking about high performance and strength and conditioning, we're wanting the athletes to excel. And I think that's the same throughout the whole industry. But what changes is the egos and stubbornness to be like, oh, actually, it's not just about 3x5 squat, bench, deadlift. We actually have to dive into a little bit deeper of what the athlete needs and what they're requiring from their sport. With such a disparity within this industry, like what are some ways that people could sort of narrow down this spectrum?
Yeah, I think start by setting expectations. If you and I roll into a Division III school or we roll into a private facility, I think having an honest conversation of who we are and what we're trying to do starts. And I've talked to a lot of coaches that are still out there. They're in D3 programs or in, FCS, D1, like low-level programs, but they're being asked to do things that are, professional. And it's great and it sounds good, but we don't have the staff. We don't have the nutrition. We don't even have a training table. Okay, great. Well, let's do an individual kind of audit of kind of what we have. And then you have a conversation with the leaders in the administration of like, well, I just spoke to someone the other day. He's got to be on the football squad. He's got to work there. But, he also just picked up the basketball team and he has to travel. And he's going to travel January to March. How do you think that's going to go in football? Like just from your body is not physically going to be present. Well, that's going to impact the coaching. And again, are we okay with it? Do you need to get somebody else? But that's where if you're, in the field and again, you and I are working together or there's just a different organization, I think taking a time to pause and reflect of like, what are we being asked to do? What can we really do? But then putting forth of like, this is the action plan and then own it. So if you've got to work 5 teams, work 5 teams, but that can't mean that you're traveling, with 2 of them or 3 of them, because now you're not actually developing. So I just think it's about honesty and alignment and matching it. And we've all been there. Like the industry gets stretched super thin and you'll have one coach that wants the world and then the next coach doesn't even care. Just don't break them. But it's important to have clear understanding of what you're being asked for.
Yeah. Our next sponsor is Apex Cool Labs. Apex Cool Labs is a pump cooling device that helps you gain further performance by cooling, not cold, cooling, and aids the recovery so you can perform more for longer. To check out what Apex Cool Labs have, there's a link in the description. And again, it goes back to that recovery piece, like what is being done for you to recover also. And I think the episode that we recorded, you spoke about this idea of you have to project your voice or you're getting smoked with it.
You have to know, like you think that you can go out and be a top performer. And I say performer as a professional, they're skills. How do you yell across the room to make sure nobody gets crushed in the rack but not blow your vocal cords out? How do you do it so that way it doesn't sound like you're angry and you're about to pick a fight with somebody? And then how do you bring that energy but then also have the critical thinking skills to be able to go calculate a 1 rep max or understand what the force velocity curve is? You have to practice that. All good.
3, 2, 1. What are some recovery pieces that you recommend your athletes do? Obviously, they've nailed the nutrition. They've nailed all the essentials. What are some things that you're asking them to look into while they are on their days off?
Yeah. So we don't get days off. We have days where we're going to be asked to perform in the sport and there's days we're not. But again, at the professional level, you are by definition a professional. And it's just a matter of, where we are kind of in the calendar year. But I would say for us, we really break recovery into 2 different domains. There's the ones that you can self-control. So for instance, sleep, own the night. As simple as get an Oura ring. Tell me how many times you crowned on your sleep score in the month. Try to get at least 10 or 15 of those days where you've controlled the environment, you've made the commitment, and you've actually gotten the sleep. So that's super simple. The other one, you mentioned the food. We know food. Nobody argues with it. It's pretty straightforward. Food becomes a problem with logistics, so especially on the road. I want to know, not that your nutrition's dialed in when you're at home, but on a 14-day road trip, you're a 200-pound athlete, 14 times, 200 grams of protein. Where did you get that? How did you get it? Do you think the team's just going to give that to you? What's your plan? And then how are you going to spread it out? and you got to deal with time zone change. So we talk a lot about those, kind of owning those. And I think if you had to pick of the recovery kind of effect size, sleep and nutrition is massive. Those are the two that if you don't have that, everything else is just, eyewash. So make sure that those are on point, because that's really where the magic happens, especially during sleep. But it also needs the proper building blocks to be able to do the work. So that is something that we talk about, but then we're constantly working on. Now, once that's squared away, now we'll get into advanced stuff. So let's talk about getting massage. Let's talk about using float tanks. Let's start talking about PBM. Let's start looking at, all these different tools that are out there, but then also measure. So a good example is sauna. Everybody loves sauna. Sauna's great. I can tell you right now, there's individuals that have done sauna and it just kills their sleep because they were doing it at night. Well, we move that to the morning. Suddenly now it's not crushing their sleep, but they like it because it makes them feel good. So that's an example of where a recovery modality isn't just what the TikTok influencers say and everything like that. You have to really practice this stuff, tag it, and then learn for yourself, what is your battle rhythm? What do you need? If you're a pitcher and you have a high stress inning, so 18 plus pitches, and say you had 30, 40 pitches in a given inning, you know that over the next 24 hours, you need to approach that differently than if you had a super efficient outing that there really wasn't a problem. So I think that's really where recovery needs to be individualized, but that's where the education and then the application gets to the athlete. And my goal, I tell every athlete, my goal is to motivate you enough to do it. Because it's going to make you money. It's going to, but they're a little hesitant because they're on the road. They don't see their family. But here I'm going to ask them to do a 1 hour float. They want to be at home, but understanding the implications for the home that you're trying to build, the life you're trying to build, the generational wealth you have in front of you. For now, you need to go to do that float because we've seen these metrics go in the right direction. And you've mentioned that you've had better performances. So the goal is to figure out what is that optimal dose, both of the internal kind of stuff that they're doing within their control, but also with the advanced recovery tools that they may use on the road or when they're at home.
Yeah, I think the time-specific recovery is quite important as well. And I don't think it gets mentioned a lot, as like some things are better done in the morning than nighttime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and again, it comes in waves. Everybody's cold plunging. Well, sometimes that's not great. And then cold plunging turned into like 55 degrees, turned into 40 degrees, turned into even colder. And then it's like, at what point are we being silly? And what are you doing it for other than the mental challenge? And I'm fine too. If you tell me it's the mental challenge and that's going to motivate you to do these other things. But what we can't do is start doing that when in reality, we should be going to see our physical therapist or our athletic trainer and actually doing stuff to, help our body because we're having some issues. So I think it's just about setting reasonable expectations and prioritizations and realize throughout the course of a season, it's always moving. If you had to have a dashboard, again, there's too many of them right now, but if you did have one, your goal would be to figure out what should be the first thing I should focus on. And is it doing more or is it doing, less, or is it actually applying more recovery? And just start thinking of recovery as like a workout.
I think from our conversations, the most vital thing that I've gone from it is that when you say it depends, it's seasonal depends. When you're looking to build, your strategy is going to look different when you're trying to rebuild. And it's like, it's not taking this textbook approach where it's like for 4 to 6 weeks, you need to do this off season. For 4 to 3 weeks, you need to do this in season. It's like, it's really specifying. And I think you had a graphic in the webinar that showed what you were working at. I think it was in Yale. And like every athlete had different colors. And those different colors all happened within the same time of each other.
Yeah. At best, we can put guardrails on. In season, we don't want the following things to happen. Bang, bang, bang. Strength, speed, power, whatever you want to do. But ultimately, at the end of the game, like, you have wins and losses. And suddenly now, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is like, it's a really unique time for strength and conditioning because we can now finally make the connection from what we're doing in the weight room, what we're doing off the field, and how it results to success on the field. Mm-hmm. And whether it's recovery or training, those lines are becoming clearer and clearer. And I think that's awesome for everybody across the field.
We kind of spoke about this personally, but I think you kind of nailed it. And obviously we don't have enough time nor money in most roles in S&C. And although the industry is getting better, but it still has those growing pains to go through. What are your thoughts on how these are starting to become more important, but people are still wanting to, chase that better thing, but then the loyalty piece comes in and all that? Like, how are you finding this sort of jump?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's not there yet. But to the point about the loyalty piece, we're still tied to the coach. That is just one of the things that hasn't broken yet. I mean, I hopefully, if I were in charge of everything, it'd be very similar to like offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, off-season coordinator. And maybe a little bit, you're seeing that now with the creation of the role of the GM, right, in college athletics. So, maybe there's a time and point, but this is where too, I push back to the coaches. You got to be able to demonstrate what you're worth or whatever you think that you should deserve to get paid. Because I know a lot of people say I should get paid more. Can you show me that, consistently for a month you can gain muscle? Can you show me that your team, consistently likes coming to the weight room? Do they like working with you? Whatever the metrics that you deem to be better than others, which is why you should be paid more, can you consistently demonstrate that? And that's what's tough. You can't be just for football. You can't just be for softball. A lot of times you have to be able to wear multiple hats. And if you do go the full football route, okay. Like at the end of the day, if people don't win, you get fired. And I think that that's why when Olympic staff say, oh, football staff gets paid so much more. Right. But look at the job security of a, Power 5, Power 4, football strength coach. It's the people from 5 years ago aren't the top 10 right now aren't the same as they were just a few years ago. So there's a, as much as every opportunity kind of looks great in one angle, there's a lot of stressors that go on. And the time commitment is very different. So I think that, as we continue to go forward, we're going to be subject to the same changes that we've seen in athletics across, all the different conferences. But really what we can do is make sure that, when athletes do connect with us, they have a positive experience, and positive, not just like, oh, I like Manny, he's a great guy. Now, everybody that works with Coach Manny's squared away, buttoned up, disciplined, got all the, the coaching art side of things, but also, physiologically, they're strong enough to go through the practice. They're able to handle the forces and loads and not fall apart. So that's really where, now in this transition time, every coach should be thinking about, well, what am I good at? What do I need to get better at? But then how can I apply that? Because remember, at the end of the day, who spends the most time with the athletes? Us. We know that. Yep. That's home field advantage. So leverage that.
I think to your point, Steph Grubbs said this the best. And it's like we need to have a way to evaluate our performance. Like our jobs is to evaluate others' performance, but like how do we determine if we were successful or not? Is it win columns? Could be, but a lot of that also depends on the athletes itself. If you've got a room full of mutants, like you have an easier job. But like were you successful?
You have a different job. I wouldn't say easier job. You have a different job.
Okay, yeah.
You just got to get them to show up. But they might not show up. And usually when you talk about teams full of stuff like that, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on in the background. And then you better have really high connections, high level connections with your players versus like, oh, I got their back squat stronger, but my entire defensive secondary hates me. Mm-hmm. So they're different challenges.
Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. But like her idea was this, like we have to be able to self-evaluate and have this very specific way. Was I successful in getting them better for what their upcoming games are going to look like? And you also said something interesting that Coach Joey mentioned on his episode. And it's like you have to prepare them for practice, which was kind of a new idea to me at the time. And it's a very interesting concept because, again, they have to be physically prepared to practice.
Yeah, and I think that you have to start with what are the things that matter. Super easy for baseball. They have a thing called a WAR rating, the wins over replacement, wins above replacement. So that's really kind of what all contracts kind of start and center around. There's other advanced metrics in baseball, but you have this WAR rating. Okay, well, within that WAR rating, what do we know? We know in the outfield, you have to have a certain amount of watts per kilo on the force plate. We know that they got to play at least like 130 games to get a high level. We know that they have to have these. Okay, so these are the KPIs in that sport. But I've to this point not had any sport where you couldn't work it back to like, okay, it's this many lifts, it's this many times. And you know what? Like say pitching at 140 innings, 150, most of the Cy Young candidates this past year were like 160 to 180 innings. That's a lot of innings. So that means recovery's got to be really important at some point. And most people get hurt, starting at kind of 90 to 100, 110 innings. You start to see that the changes start happening on the team and people going on the IL. What you do from innings 0 to 50 might be different than what you're doing from 150 to 180. But as a coach, you need to map that out. So that's kind of what I think about when we say, wins and losses, individual production. You start with what gets them paid or what gets them their NIL money and then work back from there. And if it's like, hey, you got to be a certain height, be a certain, this tall, strength coaches can't fix that. But if there's other stuff, we can. And I think that those need to be addressed. like quickly and individually as fast as possible.
What's some low-hanging fruit in developing this culture of, I'm trying to think how I can word this, in this performance piece where you are thinking about more than just squat numbers, bench numbers?
What do you mean?
So obviously now performance isn't just like you back squat 500. Can you move it fast enough? Can you decelerate fast enough to be able to deal with the loads? What's some low-hanging fruit that you found in these metrics that we can now collect that actually has a lot more say than you can body weight, you can squat more than twice your body weight?
Yeah, but I think that that's a huge one. Like, and again, whether it's squat, whether it's, pitch shark, certainly getting force up early and often in a program and development is important. Can they move their body weight at a meter per second? Do they have deficiencies in their unilateral stuff? And again, I think about like our squat program of like 420 pounds, 4 sets of 10, try to get it done. I mean, there are players who are like, that's more than my max. It's like, well, that's the problem. We need 40 reps of 420, 415, 430 in order for you to be able to do that and make it move. Well, you got to know what those levels are. And I think a lot of coaches want to roll out, do the same thing, same approach, their program. But, especially now with the way that we can connect the data points, there needs to be a lot of homework. Like I would ask on a wide receiver, on a rugby prop, what are the top people doing? What are the second tier people doing on the field? And then now let's work it back. And it could be as simple as that they have a certain amount of mass, like they weigh blank amount of kilos, or that at this height you can be a little bit, you don't have to have high maximal numbers, but you have this other trait. That's really where you go through. But I think again, strength never hurts, and strength being defined as moving to your mass, but making sure that your mass, I mean, if you're a 260-pound lineman that's super strong, it doesn't matter. You're insufficient. You're not in the weight bracket. And I think that anybody, as you're trying to do this, and I know you probably want a clearer answer, I would say like Duncan French's handbook that he put out for the UFC is a really, really great example. And I still consider that the gold standard for building an athlete composite, of really understanding not only just your player, but your player within the context of the system that you're trying to run. Brain cancer was one of the ones where, you're like, man, maybe the smallest achievements aren't, something to kind of slough off.
Sorry, we're back. Reef was up to his shenanigans. We were talking about sort of pivotal moments. You mentioned brain cancer really changed a lot of your perspective on things.
Yeah, I mean, you get in a situation where you look at someone that, just going to the bathroom is a huge win. You look at going up a flight of stairs is a huge win. And also wanting to do it, being able to see, individuals that, went through the same thing I did, but, how important kind of your mindset and your approach towards something like that can make such a huge difference. And, little did I know that was then going to go forward. And actually, again, we've mentioned him before on this call, is that, Mark talking about the behavior, like really wanting to be all in. I think a lot of times coaches are forced to work with athletes that maybe were all in. They're really good recruits, but they really don't like it, or they like part of it. They like playing in games, but they don't like doing the other stuff. Really taking a moment to pause, to really spend time. I mean, if you looked at me, again, I don't think I'm scary and whatever, but people say, oh, you look scary or unapproachable. You go talk to most of my players now, like I'm not a big screamer yeller, but I'm super intense. And I would say since, some of those other life experiences, I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time figuring out what makes them tick. And again, you like dogs, you like cats, what's going on at home, and not in a trying to pry into people's personal life, but really like what's their motivation? What are they afraid of? And how do I create a culture where they're excited to get after it? And even if they fail, they get through 3 or 4 failures because they know they got it, so to get to that success and start breeding that kind of competitive mindset. Win or learn, no lose, and being able to come at it every single day and compete and honor the game. Those are certain things that, I think that maybe earlier in my career, I took for granted. Well, why don't you want to be great? Why don't you want to be strong? I don't know. Maybe they got hurt in the weight room. Maybe they know somebody who got hurt in the weight room. Maybe they had a bad experience. So how do I go and create an environment where for 1 hour, it's all about you. It's about making you the best you can be. And you, with a team, you got 40 people. That's 40 yous that you got to really get fired up and excited. And that's what I think is so important to make sure, is that there's that excitement. The physics and the biology stuff, that works every time. But individuals, if they don't show up, or if they're not having a lot of intent in their workouts, I think it just slows everything down.
I think one of the best stories, and I'm going to ask you to repeat it, is some of your recovery stories with the PTs and your mentality behind that.
Well, you have to give me more than that. Which one?
When you were trying to stand up and take your first steps again.
Well, yeah, when I was going through my time, my uncle's sitting there and they're talking about, all right, well, you're going to Today you're gonna go for a walk around walk around the nurse's desk. All right, go back, good. And then they said, all right, well, today's a step test. And I forget exactly what the goal was, but let's just say it was like 10 or 15 steps that you had to do in a minute. I was like, man, I'm going to crush this. And I went hard. But I also skyrocketed my blood pressure and had to sit down. And my uncle had to be like, you got to remember who you're dealing with. And, at this time I got 3 titanium plates in my head, 40 staples, completely puffed out from all the medication from surgery. And I remember being like I may not look like an athlete, but in my mind I am. I'm going to be competitive. They had no idea, but that's just, again, you have to personify that to your athletes at every level. And whether it's rehab, recovery, ACL, shoulder, Tommy John, you have an injury, you are not injured. You are an athlete, and we're going to go on this journey together, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to learn how to come back, not only, the way we were, but even better. And we're going to learn a little bit of adversity management and how we're going to do that. So try to put a positive spin on stuff, because every day is an opportunity, but sometimes people do get beaten down. I think as coaches, we've talked about this, people don't like the hype coaches or whatever. Like, no, you need a little bit of hoorah. I never realized that. Some people in life have never had, someone come in, start yelling, screaming, getting hyped up. And to some people, it's really refreshing. And so if you got to be that person, I can go in. I got to get myself hyped up now, and it's exhausting, but I'll go do it, because again, if that's what's needed, we'll do it. And a pat on the back, and you can do this. And even though you and I both know, like, they could have done it all along, it's not up to us to judge. It's up to us to kind of facilitate that. And on the flip side, if I've got a 32-year-old veteran with like 3 kids and, they're just trying to get through their, 10th season, you put on a different hat. And I think that's really, again, all of that, understanding the context of who you're working with probably is much deeper than many people think.
I think it goes back to that thing of meeting them where they are. Because you are right. And I think Bartholomew says this in Conscious Coaching. It's like, some kids need a shit sandwich, and some kids just need to be loved. And
it's okay to do that too, right? Because I know that sometimes I've seen coaches, I'm not going to baby them. I'm not going to coddle them. Is it babying or coddling, or is it realizing there's like a larger thing there? They may not have ever been told that they can be great. They may not have been told that they're special. They may not have been told that it's okay to fail and get after it. So again, while I get that, you need to get people to handle and, push through adversity, I think how we get there might be different. And the good coaches have range, and that's what I would call it, is range. Like, I've seen world-class coaches where they go in and it's like, my jaw to this day still drops when I see some of these people come in, and they're just like wizards. And it's like, how do you get these people will run through walls and do anything for you? And usually it's because they made an emotional connection and they know their coach cares. Push-ups, no problem. Sprints, they'll sprint till they're blue in the face. Like that's really comes down to that connection, and not wanting to let you down, but being a part of something special. And especially if you can make that connection with a team being bigger than them, everybody's kind of searching for that. And that's something that a coach can curate in the weight room better than anybody.
I think that kind of leads to my next question. It's again, on the first podcast we did, we talked a lot about the IQ and EQ of coaching and how you're going to need to change depending on what's happening. But you've also said something that has kind of changed the way I approach my coaching, and it's the 3x5 hugs.
Yeah, you got to give credit to Rachel on that, because she was the one, because I remember being like, what are we doing for strength? She's like, yeah, 3x5 hugs. I was like, roger that. Like, again, get them to buy in. But how did you get All-Americans? How did you get like a top-ranked team, national champions? Like, how did you do that? Because you had to have that savvy and you have to have that lens. And I think for guys, it's much harder because sometimes we're emotionally inept, right? So that's a training tool and a skill that you need to learn, just like you got to learn how to coach and cue squats. Probably need some time. How's it going? Oh, it's good. Everything's good. It's not good, right? Body language is not good. Vibes are not good, right? So what am I going to do about it? And just, you don't want to have any blind spots as a coach. And something as simple as that might be the most important thing. I remember I had a client that, Russian twists. Have you ever programmed Russian twists in the last 5 years? Seated Russian twists? Yeah. Probably not in your top 5, not in your top 10. Had an athlete, loved Russian twists. Loved it. She absolutely loved them. Put them in every workout. Medicine ball, boom, boom, seated, twist. Loved it. Said, thank you so much for remembering. I love these. Now, we got her in lifting. We got her doing a bunch of other stuff. Was it at a maximal load or a load that's going to mess up her back or whatever? Did it have any benefit to her development? I don't know. But what it did do is get, a high school athlete in lifting 3 times a week for, a couple weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, great. If we need to put in Russian twist, we'll put it in. Like, don't get caught up in the larger, don't forget the larger picture here. Just by in those details. Well, no, we're not doing that because it's not we're fine. But remember, what she said is that you remembered that I like, Russian twists. Okay, cool. Let's roll.
I think I've told you this story, but it's the idea that if you can justify it to the person and have a reasoning as to why that specific lift is there, that will offset a lot of the benefits that could come from it. When I was at uni and I had to write programs for classes and justify them, and again I had to do this in exams, I put bicep curls. Teen boy, I need that buy-in. I need him to feel confident in himself. I need him to be like, I like coming to Coach Manny's classes, so I'm going to do bicep curls. Now, I can justify in elbow health. I can justify in it makes him feel confident, so therefore I'm going to put him in, get that buy-in. It's how you justify it, and if you know the type of people that you have in, you can play to that as well.
Yeah, and I think that, anything we do has a positive and a negative. But to your point, if it's bicep curls and triceps, yeah, bis and triceps, let's put it in. Because everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to feel the pump. Everybody wants to see a vein in their bicep for the first time. And especially, too, if that's what's motivating. And to your larger point, you mentioned elbow health. I'm just talking about if that's what you need to do to get a teenage athlete into the weight room and off of video games and off of the other stuff, if that's as simple as it is, yeah, absolutely, there's a value. Are you going to do a crushing bicep, workout before he goes and pitches or whatever the sport is? No, of course, you'll have context within that. Yeah. And I think, but that's what gets lost between the practitioners and, maybe some of the researchers or academics. If it's an athlete that's got to pay you and they don't like you, or you don't have enough of the things that they like, they just won't pay you. And strength coaches don't really have that problem. I think, and I've said this before, every strength coach should have to do personal training. Just to see if you're so confident, just to see if you think your knowledge is really that valuable. Because at the end of the day, that's the market. Will they pay for your knowledge, for the experiences, for the internship you had, for that experience, for that 1 hour with them? And if they don't, it humbles you. And a lot of people, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not into sales. You're selling every day. You don't mean to tell me you're not selling when you tell someone, hey, you got to snap your whole body under this hang clean as hard as you can into the ground and commit to it? Like, again, sales, confidence, whatever you want to label it, that you got to be able to do that to convey that point of why something's important and they should do it. And I think college in general used to be, well, we got them for 4 years. They have to do what we say. Well, the transfer portal shook that up.
Anymore.
Nope. Why should I stay is the question. And what you want to do is go to your head coach and be like, yeah, actually, since I've come here in the transfer portal, we've had blank amount of guys not leave or blank amount of ladies not leave because they love their experience.
Yeah. I think as well, I started in public sector, and what I find is like a lot of the soft skills gets buttoned up right there, because it's what you're saying, like your next paycheck is dependent on whether you can be like, hey Susie, your kid had a game at the weekend, how was that? It's like something that she told you the week before, and all you have to do is just check in.
Manny, do you know how many conversations I've had about Taylor Swift?
She's engaged.
Do I look like a Swiftie? Do I look like someone who cares about Travis Kelce? Do you think that I care about it? But you know what? If you're training a high school female or a college female or just anybody, if that's what we're going to talk about, great. And then we're going to go work with, say a high school boy. Well, again, now we're going to talk about TikTok. We're going to talk about this thing. You have to have that flexibility and then flip it to go, say, work with an executive who's in finance, who's, stressed out about whatever. You have to wear those hats. And to your point, private sector humbles you quickly. You'll notice people develop, I only work with this kind of person. Well, for me, that's been one of my gifts, is being able to relate. How do you relate to that 11, 12, 13-year-old? But how do you relate to the 60, 70-year-old triathlete with a, double knee replacement? Are they paying you? Are they paying somebody else? The money doesn't lie, but I think you got to have a little bit of that. But then on the flip side, for a college, it's all systems. You can't just one-off artistically every single person. You get 120 athletes, 200 athletes in a day, you better be mechanized. You better have decision trees and branches ready to go. Yep. I had this plan ready to go, but coach decided we were going to do an extra couple conditioning sets, and now the entire defensive line is now cooked. Probably not the time to do plyometrics, probably not going to do our power cleans. So if you don't have that stuff loaded into your session breaks, say in your TeamBuildr, you're just guessing, and just doing things lighter isn't always going to work. So you want to have, just like in a game, audibles ready to go depending on the situation.
100%. So kind of 2 points on that. Obviously, we have spoken a lot about flexible nonlinear periodization and having that session breaks, having that sort of branches, and I love this because it's like, obviously we always talk about like we need a plan from A to Z, right? But like those are usually done on the fly. Like what if we took 5 minutes before to just program 2 other sessions that when you get there you're just like, all right, cool, yeah, we're doing this instead, and we don't have to make it up on the fly, and then we de-stress. And then again, it goes back to that piece about the AI. It's like, now that we have 3 sessions, we can spend more time coaching and watching what they're doing.
I mean, we're averaging between 15 and 18 section breaks per athlete for this baseball season. So, and again, is it strength? Is it speed? Is it power? And then what are the branches off of each of those? And those are pre-scripted. Because again, if you start making stuff up on the fly, the counter to that is, okay, you did adjust and adapt, but did you take into account the weekly load? Did you take into account the recovery? You may not. So that's where being able to spend the time, build out your branches, build out your gatekeeping, put in the algorithm to know, all right, this is going to increase my confidence that this is truly the best plan to go forward. But, you know, you don't have to do necessarily as many as we do, but like, even if you just have 3, like A lift in the section break is going to be what we want to do. That's my quote unquote block. That's my power. That's my thing that I think we're going to have. Then we're going to have the, like, we're banged up. So we're going to have a B option. So maybe we're working angles and we're not really doing maximal forces, and there's some restorative quality. And then there's the C block, which is you're completely smoked. You haven't slept and, you know, your hamstrings are on fire. All right, well, now we can actually, you know, maybe do some tissue restorative stuff. And then, you know, also you're going to go to athletic training, or we're going to grab you a float at the end of the session. Even just something as simple as that times 4 workouts a week, that's 12 workouts in the rotation. And as you alluded to in our webinar, you take a team of 30, 40 athletes, I guarantee you not a single person is going to have the same 4-week structure. So that's why I laugh. If I hear anybody say block, upper, lower, you don't know. I mean, at best, maybe 24, 48 hours. And then we can have hopes, we can have wishes and dreams. But like, you got an aura, you got a force plate, you got the feedback, you got the training logs. It's way more dynamic than it used to be.
100%. My second point to that is the individualization of training. And I'm kind of currently helping a friend out in his gym, and he has a lot of classes. So it's like public members can do the classes. But like, I now see movement if inefficiencies, or people be like, oh, I've got a lower back pain, or my knee doesn't want to do that. So like, I'm trying to piece together what these issues could be. And it could be just as simple as be like, hey, like, how does that feel? Like, when we do this way, how does that feel? Does it change if we do this? And just like, so I love to talk about like every athlete, every person that comes to me is a puzzle, right? What pieces fit together and where and when, and how that then constitutes to this person. And I think when we're, again, talking about blocks, if we were just to say, hey, this is your goal, this is your block, go. They can come to you in a couple of weeks' time and be like, hey, that's actually made me feel 10 times worse. Yeah, but the block, it's the block. Like, it worked.
It's
like,
the block.
But like, okay, cool, but like, it didn't work for them. What do you do now? Is it like, do you power through, or do you take a step back, put your ego to the side and be like, hey, actually, let me fucking rejig all of this?
Yeah. And I think too, you know, you mentioned, because it sounds like it's general population. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
Gen Pop. I would encourage you, and kind of, you know, what we did at Mass General, let's just say our adults. I want every adult to be able to touch their toes, not because there's a white paper that says, but like that. I want every adult to be able to sit on a box and stand up without knee pain, right? So there's your squat, getting off the toilet. It's your activities of daily living.
Mm-hmm.
Have set things that your quote unquote block cleans up before we get into the, oh, I'm a triathlete. And I would always remind people, well, we want to be sport specific. We want to be individualized. Well, at the end of the day, everybody takes algebra, and then they take, you know, geometry, then they take pre-cal. Like, so there's a progression. Oftentimes, if you get someone who's in that environment that you're talking about, they probably have some mobility restrictions. And again, we're not talking you need to get a goniometer or a Qualisys motion capture system. Just like, hey, if you scratch your back, does your shoulder feel like it's going to fall out? Can you go under this hurdle and not have your knees explode? Whatever you deem to be things that you want your population to have, get those properties done first. And then I promise, whatever you do thereafter, whatever their other training goals, will be better, because what you've just done is you've identified the limiting kind of forces and the limiting areas that are eventually going to be the low back problem, the knee problem, that's going to stop them from training. Because your goal, especially with an adult, is keep them training. Like, don't have downtimes, don't have injuries, keep them moving. And that doesn't mean be easy, That means being very targeted. Like you said, if there's knee pain, how does that feel? Oh, a step up hurts. Well, what about, a lunge, or what about a single leg deadlift? Like, figure it out and meet them there, but do it with a purpose of having a key set of things that you're saying, hey, these are the minimum standards that everybody needs to be able to do in this demographic.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit more context behind this. So she pulled she tore her core muscles when she was pregnant, and then obviously she had to overcompensate with the big belly. You kind of arch your back a little bit more to carry the weight and distribute it. So then her lower back got affected. So then we're now dealing with two sides of that coin. But when I was doing a couple little tests, so to rebind the core after pregnancy, you just have to do some tightening core exercises. So we went through all of that, no pain. But as soon as we lifted the head up a little bit, excruciating. And then I stuck something under her back. Her low back was now sore, but when she done the excruciating pain movements, she was no longer in pain. And it's identifying those things, and I think that's where, again, the public sector and Gen Pop helps you out a lot. Is you get so many cases, you have to figure out what is going on, and quick. But kind of going back to your point with the having the standard tests for everyone, I call that my healthy living tests. And it's can you carry your shopping? Can you lift all your shopping up into the shelf? Can you walk with heavy load? What's all going on? What are your requirements for life? Can we meet them?
Yeah, I remember one of the physicians working with, and I don't remember which stop this was in training, but it was talking about with one of the grandparents we were working with stenosis and kind of back stuff. And it was well, they can't lift more than whatever. It was some super low number. And I said, well, that's really unfortunate, because she likes to swing her grandkids around on her hip and carry the grandkids. And the grandkids, by the looks of it, weigh about 35 pounds. So are we all on board that, we need to figure out a way in a controlled environment, controlled ranges of motion, that if that's what the activity is, if that's the thing, what are we going to do? Say, stop playing with your grandkids? We need to find a way to meet in the middle. And that's really, too, where you have to be really careful, because you can't go against medical advice. You got to follow what the doctors say. But to the doctor's point, we can't have people live in a bubble. And typically when they come to the gym, at least if they're in the private sector, usually means they're looking for change, or they're looking for some sort of solution. But to your point, I love the analogy, because I think the same way, of the puzzle, the Rubik's Cube. What do I got to do? Some of it's behavioral. Some of it's, easing some fears. Some of it's about getting stronger. Some of it's about carving out time in their schedule, whatever it is. But you have to, at best, bucket it, at least bucket them. And at best, you develop an individualized plan that should seem like individualized medicine or a well-tailored suit.
Yep.
But yeah, the blocks typically don't work. And it's interesting when people say blocks, wow, that block was used for 10 different people. That seems logistically comfortable, not necessarily the best plan. You have to really be honest with yourself. And I think now more than ever, patients, clients, athletes, they can tell when it looks like, you're their fifth favorite team, and that you're just kind of cutting corners. You know what? This workout card actually still has the date on from 2 years ago when you did this same block in January in 2022.
Yep.
They know.
I'm laughing because I've just released the 100th episode, and we were talking about, I include the clip of you talking about the ER and tell me what block they're running on the ER. And it's that was a brilliant line, because it's you can't just pick and choose. You have to find out what's happening. But I also really liked what you said about easing fear. And I think in the medical setting, it's very easy and quick to be you need to stop exercising. If it's causing you pain, doing it. So then when they eventually get around to actually, I have to do something. Let me go to the gym and try and figure this out. So then our whole job is to try and retrain them not to have this fear that they've had built up by medical professionals. And it's kind of we not only have to work out what their goals are and demands and what they need to achieve, but now we also have to kind of play therapists.
Yeah, and I think, but that's where you have to have the relationship with the doctors. I mean, I think all of us have the story about, the physician saying, oh yeah, you'll be back in 6 months. And it's whoa, just because your graph is going to be ready doesn't mean that this person, when they got injured, they were actually a train wreck. Then we just had 6 months of deconditioning. Let's not set expectations that we're going to wave the magic wand and we're going to be ready to go. Everything needs to be milestones and then working together. And again, we are strength and conditioning coaches. We're not strength therapists. We're not strength athletic trainers. We're not strength physical therapist. All of these things have to come together to make sure. And again, if you're the single point of, contact for this individual, no one to refer out and work together. But to the physicians, yeah, like sometimes you need to not do something. But my question is but are they going to be asked to do it again? Mm-hmm. Did they have the strength and physiological underpinnings to do it right in the first place? And then how do we progress them? And some of those progressions take a long time. Some of those progressions wouldn't take so long if they weren't afraid. But to your point, think about an ACL or think about a shoulder, that first pop, that first cut, that first plant. We know that if the athlete's not confident, that plays into the long-term injury profile. So working together as a team and having meetings, and I hope to, since we've last talked, and again, I kind of, right now, we live in our own world, but I hope that everybody listening has conversations with other members of their staff, and whether it's the assistant coaches, head coaches, have those conversations early and often, especially if you've taken over a new team or there's something going on. Don't just let conversations be every time there's an emergency meeting call and it's super contentious and everybody's pointing fingers and then why is their injury rate so high? Schools are starting, football kicks off next week. How many injuries? And it's well, why do we have so many injuries? Well, again, all of those conversations and questions are going to be dealt with much better if there's pre-existing relationships between all the shareholders and everybody pulling their weight. And you know what? Sometimes things happen. But at least if you as a program organization can have alignment and what are we trying to do? What are the expectations? You know why there was injuries? Because they didn't go to the weight room. Or you know what? They did go to the weight room, but when they went to go get treatment wasn't open because we don't have enough staff because everybody's on the road. Those are the real nitty gritty things that I think that if you're living it day to day, you're probably, understanding what I'm saying. But, some of the academics and some of the professors that haven't lived it, it's tough. The trenches is not easy. And especially in today's environment, in the college setting, the game has changed so much. Professional setting, it's changed so much. So again, I really feel for the people that are in it. And, my just best advice is that, you take that time to make as many connections as you can, because then that typically adds as a force multiplier, in good times and in bad.
100%. And I think now with the NIL, high school kids aren't getting pushed to Division 1s. They're taking kids from D2s and lower.
No doubt. It's all moved. It used to be that you high school and then fed into the college and the college fed into the professional leagues. But now, I would even say some of the Division 1 programs act as feeder programs for the Power 4. So be realistic, be honest. How long do you have the players and what can you do to make that connection? And some players you can connect with, some you can't. But again, having realistic expectations of your program and the people that you have, it only gets better with alignment.
And I think that's what's crucial is the early expectations and giving them context to why.
We're undersized. Correct. Yep. Yeah, coach. We did the DEXA. Everybody's under. Okay. Well, good. Well, maybe we don't do mat drills and stuff in January and February because, we need to sleep because we need to get stronger. Now, that's not saying we're not going to do mat drills forever, or maybe we do it later in the year. But yeah, the most pressing thing is we don't have alignment over 270. Probably want to get on that. Or, I think, to defend some of the coaches, if people go into the weight room and it's, a circus and people aren't focused, the attention to detail, the discipline, all of those things that coaches want, the weight room has to be an extension of the program. So if the program's laissez-faire, then the weight room should be laissez-faire. If the program's more structured, then the weight room needs to be more structured. So you have to have really good clarity on what the product is that you're being asked to put out day in and day out.
What's one word or phrase that you would ban from this industry currently?
Again, you're trying to get in trouble.
We can even go trend.
Again, sports science really feels like it's the pendulum has gone so far out of the box. And, you never like to see people that like being around spreadsheets more than chalk bowls. It's just a bad recipe. And, I think that the context, the promotion of, this software technology, this monitoring load, whatever. I think it's, the pendulum as it swings back, every strength swings back. Yeah, no, we're weak. We need to lift things. And, as you're trying to put weight on the bar and someone trying to tell you that you need to optimize a load management, I think that right now has really caused a lot of friction. And also too, getting data after the fact, being a Monday morning quarterback doesn't help with team dynamics. So anything that you collect needs to have purpose, but then there also needs to be an expected uptime. So if I don't get data for 3 weeks, and then when that data comes out, you tell me that the program I wrote 2 weeks ago didn't work or didn't help, that's tough. And I think that that's just, again, a new dynamic I never personally had to deal with, but I know talking with clients that, that's our first rule. What data are we collecting? What are we going to do about it? What's the uptime? And making sure that that's delivered. And you know what? If the uptime isn't there, then we're just not going to bring it up in the conversation because it's not fair to the people in the trenches, on the court, or out at the field that are trying to do the best that they can. So I would just say, not a word, but sports science right now needs to get restructured to kind of be in line with the rest of the team.
I think the best example I know of a whole team being like a unit is the UFCPI. Like, they've also just came out with a new concussion protocol for their athletes, and it's a 3-step process. So essentially it's like exercise tolerance, different skills that require physical exertion, so like lifting, different bodily positions, so like head movements, and then they've got a cognitive piece as well. I think it's fascinating because like each sector of that team had to play into this test, and a lot of egos were hurt, but they kind of thought like, hey, let's put the ego to the side, let's develop this thing so our athletes can come back healthier and quicker to what they love to do.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, who's running that program? Duncan French. You go look at one of the superstars, living legends that we have, and again, he's so humble in how he approaches the game, and he's not posting every single day on Twitter and Facebook, but he's out there working and doing things. And you alluded to concussion. I think they, again, without question, the gold standard on what an athlete composite was like. But where did Duncan come from? Duncan came out of UConn. He worked with Dr. Kramer and Marish and the rest of that group at Camelot with Jerry Martin and all the other people that we've listed, where Duncan's been in it. He's a coach, he gets it, but also in his position of leadership. Not surprising that the thing that you alluded to into what I alluded to, those are program and departmental documents, doctrine that everybody gets behind. And because, again, the leadership that he's instilled and all the other, because I know they've got a fantastic team surrounding all those athletes, that again it's a nice model. Now, do I wish it was a professional team and not martial arts, in the sense that, I don't know how much the soccer coach can relate to that, but conceptually it's an organization that's super focused to trying to really maximize the long-term performance arc of the individual. Yeah, they got to be healthy, but they also got to win fights. They got to build up a brand. They got to have people interested to watch to see them come out. So all of that goes into play, and I think they do an absolutely incredible job. And I bet you if you ask them, they're working on the next thing. Like, they don't sit back. Every single year it seems like they come out with a new thing, new application, new whatever. But again, I credit to Duncan's work that he's done. But he's been doing that since even before he arrived there. Just, again, that's kind of his mantra that he's had everywhere he's gone, even when he was in England. I mean, again, you just see the programs he's put out. It's just really incredible.
I have asked, and they are.
Not surprised.
So what's interesting is, like, I've managed to get really well connected with the UFC team. So like not Gavin Pratt, but Becky, Olivia, had Glenn Castro. Like, I've sort of spoken to all of them, and they've all been on the podcast, and it's fascinating how they're actually like all a unit. And like Heather she's going to Shanghai, she's in Mexico, she's at the Vegas PI, and like it all just runs smoothly, like all of it.
Well, it runs. And again, we say smooth compared to what? I'm sure they're constantly, as you alluded to, they're always, that's not an idle organization. And it's not only that by the fighters, but also, I think from Dana, from what he's pushed from day one, like the goal was to be a premier fighting, attraction at the highest level. So I think it's important that you have from top to bottom that unification. If Dana didn't care, if the rest of the organization didn't care, you wouldn't see that. So everybody's held accountable to the standard within the organization to do your job at the highest level. But it's awesome to see, and it's good to have examples, I think. Sometimes when people can get kind of downtrodden or like, it can't work like that anywhere. Well, no, they're doing it, right? And what can we take? What piece can we take from this? What piece can we take from that to make our current situation better? And then do that reflection at the end of the year as a staff and say, yeah, no, we did get better in this area, but next year, how do we focus on this? And that's growing the team as much as it is growing the athletes is super important to make sure that you can stay focused and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. On that, when you were at Yale, obviously you had the team under you. What was that process of sort of having the team, and what gets assigned to who, and how do you find out their interests and what they're good at, and how do you then assign tasks based on that?
For the coaches or for the teams?
Coaches.
Yeah, so for the coaches, as we go in, we had a lot of in-services, so we were bringing in lecturers all the time. I can't remember the exact kind of rhythm, but it was at least once a month I was trying to bring in, whether it's Dr. Kramer, Dr. Robinson, bringing in the guys from PPAC out in Long Island to go do that, trying to really make sure that, again, when you were on staff, it should be like a master's or a PhD in human performance, bringing in other professionals. We did that. And then in our one-on-ones and as a team, reflecting individually, but then also reflecting as a team, we would do, big thinking, think tank sessions in the summer. We do it after football season. And then we would go forward. And that's really where some of those hard conversations came out of like, what are we doing with the soccer team? What are we doing with the fencing team? What are we doing with the swimming team? And having write-ups and saying, yeah, no, like my goal is to get this team, women's golf, to show up 3 times a week. Well, what do you want to do? Strength, speed, power, DEXA, VO2 like, nope, not worrying about any of it. The goal is to get buy-in. Okay, great. Next team. And then we go down. But, you had 32 teams. So every team was different. And I thought, and again, stealing from the guys over at UConn, is it just really going through and treating each organization, each team as its own, but then also looking at the, which coaches like a ton of feedback, which coaches like a little bit hands off, and then trying to match that to the personality of the coaches. And we had to move people around, and, staff changes and turnover and people would leave. And so you'd have to move around, but you would go, you'd make sure that coaches, ideally, the only time that they meet with them shouldn't be when they take over the team. Manny, you're going to come do a guest experience, do a guest lift with us over with lacrosse. I want you to come over. And then, hey, you're going to do football, just to go and see in that environment. And you'll see that, some coaches really excelled in the large groups, the theater. Other coaches were way better at the smaller setting and really individualizing and connecting at a super high level and just trying to match their strengths. And you did the best you could, but making sure that every team, though, was treated at a high level, but then having that accountability. You tell me that you want to get buy-in in X amount of time per week. May rolls around in that semester. I don't want to hear it. Well, they weren't really that bought in, or, they weren't committed. It's on you. And, every year got better, but I think that everybody knew there was an accountability to whatever you decide, Manny. I mean, this is your team. You're going to go work with the equestrian team, like whatever you decide is important, but then show me that you did it. And I think that alludes to some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier with Coach Grubbs. As a director, we could set that tone, then I can set that expectation. Well, how come, this team isn't doing DEXA? Well, coach, remember when you met with your coach, your goal was to have the nutrition training table rather than focusing on, say, speed training, whatever it was, to kind of echo and support the coaching staff across as a whole and have everybody's back. So that's how we kind of approached it. And I think the coaches appreciated it. And I think that the sport coaches appreciated it too, because what they really wanted to hear was we weren't just getting the leftovers from the football team.
I think again, one of the best examples of that is when I think it was either Nike or Adidas were trying to recruit, what's his name, Steph Curry, and they still had another player's name attached to the presentation. Like, it's not great. And it's again, we were talking in the lobby of the podcast about, like, it's the stuff behind the scenes that people don't see that makes a difference. And it's the very small, very minuscule details that makes or breaks this program. And it's, again, I think it goes back to that thing where you have to give a shit.
Or accept that you don't, because I'm also okay with that. Yeah. My problem is if you say you do and you don't, that's a bigger problem than, like, you got to collect a paycheck. You have no other option. You got the golden handcuffs. You got the job that, you can't leave, and life's kind of put you there, and you're going to do the bare minimum. Okay, great. But I don't think it's fair to the athlete, individual, or person you're working with if they're like, well, why did I get the coach that doesn't care? That's really, really tough. And, for us, we're lucky, that's not an issue. But, I think about some of our clients, to put in perspective, when we do something with them at Lyft or we're doing recovery, we're talking about like $15,000 to $20,000 a minute. That's the cost. When you're 2 minutes late, there's a cost to that. You got to be there. You got to be squared away. You got to greet them at the door. If you're holding a banquet or you're holding a function, okay, great. Like, what's their favorite soda? What does their kid like to have? What kind of, do they like pizza? Do they like, wings? What is it? All those details. And I get a lot of that from Boyd, because Boyd would talk about all the time in Nebraska, the way that they would give out the awards, the way that you make someone feel special, the way that you made that connection. That was huge into the success of the program. But it does take a lot of effort. So I think having an honest conversation of what your standards are, and then hopefully you have a community and a group or a team that holds each other. And your standards should be something you can't just do by rolling out of bed. They should be a little bit hard. They should take a little bit of effort to achieve it.
100%. And I think, again, I was part of an internship where this was definitely a fact. And speaking to you and your interns, I know it was a fact in yours too, is like, during your internship, you should be able to see if this is the industry for you or not. Like, with Coach Mac's internship, you're drinking water from a fire hose. Either you like it, love it, or you hate it. if you hate it, it's your time to be honest and be like, hey, this isn't for me. Like, I got under that fire hose and I was like, give me fucking more. Because, like, I love the human performance and being able to see your athletes, like, progress. Like,
And was there any doubt from Coach Mack what he was going to do?
No, never.
Did he tell you what he was going to do? Did he actually follow through with it? Because the problem, to your point, you loved it. I would see people who were like, well, I don't want to do this. Well, you can't pick and choose. That's not the real world. And you loved it and you fell in love with it. And it's a career that you'll have forever.
And I spoke to my fiance about this, and it's the things like, you have to also love the menial tasks, because that's what gets you the bigger tasks. And I think I spoke about this in our last podcast, and it's like, I sometimes had to clean chalk off the floor. It was the most mind-numbing, boring job you could assign me. But I fucking spit-shined that. I was about to. I'm like, I'm getting this. I would turn the W's. W's on the plates, W's on the dumbbells. Zero issue. But then, on the offset of that, I got to assign tasks to people, because I proved that I was able to follow menial tasks. And I think it's this progression of tasks that people don't think. They think, oh, I hate this task, so I'm not going to perform it to my best abilities. But, like, what's the detriment to that? And to you,
they look at the tasks as either I'm too good for this, why am I doing this? Or they take pride in that, like, I'm selected to do this task and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And to your point, that's an ethos thing, because then that translates to the workouts, to the testing, to the sports science, to the leadership, to all that stuff, the taking pride, and that the athletes that work with you, you have it down to make the turf blue. You have all the dubs pointed in the right direction. That's the level of care that you take to the weight room. What do you think he's going to put into your workouts? Take pride in that and extend it. And then as you build your own culture and program, but people see it, and you can't, that stuff you can't just light switch on and off. Like, we're super squared away in how we treat our athletes, but we leave our weight room an absolute dump. That's not how it works. It goes hand in hand, but you have to, when you're younger, have those opportunities to see where you get the detail fatigue, because that's what it is. It's just, you start cutting corners, you're tired, you want to go home, you're tired, good, do it tired. But that's how important it is that it needs to get done, because at some point I'm going to need you to spot someone under that 500-pound, bench press, and you better be ready to go. Because now when you mess up or you cut those details, people can get hurt. So it's a natural progression, to your point. And I think that as long as the internship, the mentorship, or the opportunity is honest with what the expectations are, then, it's up to you to figure out if it's a good fit or not.
100%. And again, having spoken to some of your interns, the blue, to a lot of people will be menial and just like mind-numbing, and they would rather watch paint dry. But I think the story and ethos behind it is so much more important than actually picking the turf. It's like, what is your grade of detail? How much detail are you willing to put into something? I love it.
No doubt. And just, you take that with you, and whether you come in through your internship and become a doctor, or you become a physical therapist, whatever it is, part of that journey is figuring out what those lines and what those standards are that you want to do to make you different, to get you paid, to have a career, all those things. But I also think if you don't have it, if you just go like academic certification, you're clowning yourself if you think that you're going to be able to go in and operate in the trenches. There's just a whole nother level and another game that you do need an environment where you can fail. Yeah, you might get made fun of, or senior coaches, or, Coach Mac's going to get on you, but nobody died, nobody got hurt. And then you either, learn from it and grow, or you decide it's not for you. But either way, it's way better to figure that out than being 10, 15 years in the game, incompetent, and then frustrated with life. You know what I'm saying?
100%. What's your current blue?
Oh, man, it's just, again, it's hard unless you see it, but just for us, the level of detail on the profiles for the players, on the testing, the data, the individualization. I mean, offline, I can show you just an example of the gatekeeping protocols for all the different flexible nonlinears with all the branches, to myself, to our staff, even to our non-carbon staff, making sure that the details are squared away and that we're doing it in a speed. I mean, like, hey, oh, you have this problem, roger that, like, we'll find you the food, like we will find you the food, prep place in Seoul, Korea, with your macros, write up a Korean explanation to your translator to make sure that you have all of your macros, and it's going to be delivered to your house by the time you get home from practice. I'm going to get on that right now. Oh, you're playing, in Atlanta and you're flying out to San Diego. Let me find you the float place. Let me coordinate that. I will find the place in Midtown Manhattan that'll get you a DEXA scan, done before 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Oh, you need a coach, because we've had situations where wheels up 24 hours. We've had an individual, call us at 11 o'clock at night and said, I need you there. And it's Roger that. And then, overnight we get there and we greet them first thing in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, smile on your face, because that's what they needed. That's just a level of detail that we pride ourselves in. When people go, that's impossible, or, that's incredible. It's what we do, but that's what we take pride in. And again, from the staff top to bottom, and the way we develop our apps, or the way that we do that program, but super critical reflections every Friday. And having it as a staff, I mean, you sit down and you talk to Slash and you ask him about, in the programs, what did you see this week? What were things? What were considerations? What did I miss? You start catching things and you start getting better, and just taking pride in doing that, just like a regular staff. But now we have a hybrid staff of a bunch of different agents and a bunch of different employees. It's really, really exciting, because again, at the end of the day, we're trying to help as many people around the globe as we can. But the logistics of doing so are pretty tough, like in France and Florida and California and Korea and Japan, all of that stuff. But we know where the float tank center is in Japan. Man, if you ever go to Tokyo, I can get you hooked up. Like, we know where it is. We can get you a reserved spot. But when people ask for that and we're getting things done in minutes that seem impossible, it's pretty exciting. So I think our blue right now is just a sickening level of detail for each of these people, because they're entrusting their careers with us. And at the end of the year, when we line up arbitration or we line up contract negotiations, I hope that if they work with us, they consider us a huge competitive advantage, that we're leveraging everything in human performance to help them with their careers. Teams are measuring all these analytics in game, but like, we're ordering sleep tests. We're working with some of the best doctors and, sports psychology, all of these things and resources that are available to help them be able to provide, for their family.
Mm-hmm. I think it's, again, I've mentioned on this podcast a number of times, and I've mentioned it to you and Rachel. Like, that is one thing that I have learned, and I kind of look at you and Rachel as not just S&C mentors, but like business side S&C mentors and level of care. And it's that, again, your goal is to add revenue to their performance pocket. Like, it's not just about the X's and O's of strength and conditioning. It's like, okay, how can we put you in a position to negotiate more money next year? I think that's like, and again, it goes back to that blue, like, that's how you're choosing to put your level of detail in. And it's like, it's that 10 steps ahead.
Trying. And she brings an incredible lens that, when we think about, how we want to approach something, I could tell you, like right now, like the blind spots that I would normally have, she picks up. And it's like inflections in the voice, it's the body language, it's all that stuff. And again, being able to go in and coach with the best of them, but be able to back out, debrief, and then also pull off the logistics. And also knowing that the wife's coming in town and the wife likes this type of IPA, and make sure that that's delivered to the hotel and all that, all those little touches. Like, those are just levels of detail that, when we ask people, like, who else would you use, or people say, who's your competitor? Like, we don't want there to be anybody. I'm sure there's people that do it, but we'd like to offer that as a unique service. But through both of our experiences, and both, on the business side, but then also working with people, that allows to have a really unique perspective on this and just keep going as much as, we can. We're full capacity this season, fully expect that as we expand next year, get back to full capacity with another wait list. But just again, for us, yeah, they need to make more money. That's kind of the larger goal, but also hearing people talk about, I never thought I could do this, or I never thought, I'd be able to, perform at this level. It's super exciting, because again, you only live once and you want to make an impact. And I think every coach loves seeing that. And so for me, that's been really great to go from college, high school, elderly, everywhere in between, just being able to help so many people. And especially now with all the tools and technology, we can do it anywhere in the world in real time. And it's just awesome.
I think it gives you different ranges as well. Like, I've done the public sector, I've done kids classes, I've done collegiate, I've done high performers that don't get paid. Like, you learn these different ranges to your coaching ability. Like, I still need the same level of buy-in from the Division 1 athlete to the international athlete that doesn't get paid to travel. And they're international. So like, and then I also need it from the kids. That's kind of, you need to have these ranges to be able to match what they're coming in with.
Yeah, and if you don't have it, are you willing to learn it? Are you willing to be humble enough? I mean, I'm think about been doing this for quite a few years now. I still have so much more to learn. I have so much more in the programming, so much on the physiology, so much on just listening, like really listening, really listening, and then making sure that not only did you hear the words hit your eardrums, but can you reference what was in a conversation that happened in November? last year, 2 years ago, stack and look for sequences, patterns, and say, you know what, I think, did I hear you correctly when you said this or that? That's tough, and building up endurance and being able to do it, and not just come in and say, I know what's going on. No, I want to get to know you. And for me, I'm lucky that we have a small roster of individuals we work with, but if you're a college coach, you got a lot of connections to make. But
100%.
No better place to do it than the weight room, where you can set someone up to have success every single day. Even if it's one more push-up, you went from 5 push-ups to 6 push-ups. Get hype, right? From a 40-inch vertical to a 41. Set up those opportunities to create success, because that momentum, that energy is contagious one way or another.
I asked you this last time, but I want to see if it's changed since everything that's happening with your business and the way you are going. What is one piece of advice that you would give coaches coming into this industry, or coaches who are trying to progress in this industry?
What I said last time, but I just get in this for the right reason. Know your why, but stay humble and hungry. We talked about Duncan French, super hungry, but also humble enough to take my phone call. If I call him or reach out, Coach Mac, as he goes out and he does his thing, he'll still pick up the call. And again, you can't necessarily take care of everybody, but in your circle and in your tribe, as you go forward, stay humble, stay hungry, and go. And if you think you know everything, again, you're just kidding yourself. Because the more we know every day, the research is getting better, the technology is evolving. And I say this to every coach listening, and I say coach specifically, the people that are in the trenches. This is kind of our time right now to make the biggest impact. Because for a long time, we were a support staff or an extension of the coach. And again, we still are, but the rules of the game are changing. The clarity of what we can offer and the value we can provide, not only to the athletes here in the now, but also in the later part of their life and dealing with stress and becoming just better humans. Right now, if you go back in the history of time, try to show me a different one that's better. And we can go all the way back down to Professor Attila and Eugene Sandow and Sanduina and all the people back in the days of the original gyms here in the United States and in England. This is the best time, if this is something that you love to do, to help people, to combine all of these different streams of science and technology to actually change people's lives. I hope we see a bigger groundswell of coaches coming into the field because you like helping people, and whatever flavor that turns into, great, but we need more people like that. So I would definitely go with stay humble, stay hungry, and really try to push yourself each and every day to try to help whoever you're working with.
Yeah, 100%. Tom, appreciate you so much for coming on again and spending 2 hours with us. If you
Anytime.
could let people know where they can sort of find you and reach out to you.
Yeah, you can go to newmanhp.com, or you can go on Instagram, reach out to, there you go, to that Instagram, Newman HP. You can reach out there, but super easy to get in touch with. And again, happy to help any of the listeners kind of no matter where you are in kind of your journey and, in your process. Because again, so many people have helped me get to where I'm at. And again, I think of the strength and conditioning industry as a kind of a community and a village. So whatever we can do to kind of pay it forward in our conversations and our actions, I'm happy to do so. But again, thank you so much for having me on for a second time. And anytime you need anything, give me a shout.
100%. I love speaking to you, Tom. You always challenge my thought processes, and I like that. I like that a lot.
Appreciate it.
Peace.
Peace.